Welcome back to the Audible Angle. I'm Qui-Gon Jinn. With me always is my apprentice, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we're here to talk about MCU movies and Star Wars really quick. We decided that's a good way to get a lot of clicks. Just kidding. As promised, we're going to talk NCAA hoops, or at least we were going to, but the NFL just asserts dominance on the media cycle at all times. We are doing NBA hoops, a little cat out of the bag on how production works here. We're doing NFL first, then we're cutting it. Then we're going to sit right here, drink probably 4 more Diet Cokes, and get us through college hoops. We're going to hit the Big Ten. We're going to hit the top 25, a Big Ten versus Big 12. You'll get all the answers you need coming up shortly. But first off, the NFL, and really in no particular order. And I'm actually going to reverse the order that we just talked about 2 minutes ago to get we do record live in front of a non-studio audience, and within the last 15 minutes, maybe 40 minutes or so, Irving raising his hand.
No, I'm just waving to the non-studio audience.
That's right. We got our producers working overtime as we change on the fly here. Our friend Quincy, the Minnesota Vikings, parted ways, and I just saw a little reporting on X. Sounds like, not a shocker. Sounds like it was KOC banging on the desk saying JJ's not ready. We can't go into this season with a team ready to compete with only JJ. Sounds like he got overruled, and at the end of the day, they had to drop the hammer on somebody or something. Quasi gone in Minnesota. What were your favorite memories, Herbs?
Well, there's a lot of favorite memories being a Packer fan, Dilly, but it's probably a positive day, I would guess, in Vikings country. I'm sure if you're on the podcast and people are talking about it, local radio out by you, I'm sure this is a positive move, and it's probably something that's probably a year or two in the coming on this. And as a matter of fact, in true Audible Angle fashion, I was out there for the last 2 days. We kind of caught wind in some of our pre-production meetings at the early in the week that something was be going down. So you and the producers, senior producers, said, Herbs, you got to get on the road. So off I went and arrived in the Twin Cities on late Wednesday night, spent some time on Thursday. I got back real late, and it sounds to me, with some of the insiders I was talking about, this is definitely what you said. This is a coach's decision, kind of pushing for it. Somebody had to fall, and it wasn't going to be KOC.
Little hat tip to JJ's Clubhouse in Golden Valley. The waitress did, said she didn't want us to mention her by name. Thought she'd get a little overwhelmed at the workplace, didn't kind of want to deal with it. But I'll tell you what, she took good care of us. Very friendly, very easy to work with as a customer. I'll leave it at that. But it was a good time there. So we met face to face. It was busy, though. We had, you mentioned producer guys. We had the equipment on site, and they're going to bring it in. We're going to record live there. And it was just too packed. So the producer guys, they sat in the truck, and I don't know if they smoked cigarettes or what they were doing out there, but, we met for a couple hours, went over our notes from our meetings around Minneapolis about this Viking situation. Now, if you look back at the drafts, there was a lot of meat left on the bone by Quesi in the drafts. They didn't have a ton of success. Usually there's, maybe one, even like Dallas Turner, like he's kind of like, he's probably on a little bit stronger path than Lucas Van Ness, but it's that's like a highlight for him, is a guy that's like showed some interesting things at defensive end, but his whole first year he didn't play hardly. We'll see how it turns out. What do you think if you're JJ McCarthy and you think, what message does this send to him?
Well, I think organizational wide, I think this is a vote of confidence, right? That they want to try to get this right from the top end, the Wilfs. They want to try to get this right, and they saw something wrong, and at least they're not waiting. I mean, they did wait. Dilly, like I said earlier in the open here, I think it's probably 2, maybe 1 year. Our regular contributor, Druzy, has been screaming at the top of his lungs about this guy. not real happy. And I think I have a lot of faith outside looking in, Dilly, in KOC and his ability to get things done there. He's had some flashes. I'm not completely sold on JJ McCarthy. I think JJ McCarthy is just happy he's sitting in the number one seat right now, if we're being honest. I think there's a lot of questions in between the 6 inches between his ears, because he can't be confident. He can't be comfortable in his seat, which I guess nobody really is in the NFL. By the looks of this, I read an article earlier today that Mensa was actually at the Senior Bowl scouting as of yesterday. There was a picture of him scouting yesterday, and this morning it comes out and he's canned. So this is a not for long league. That's what NFL stands for. But I think it was a long time coming, Dill, is what my point. And I don't think JJ McCarthy has anything to worry about, if you will. I think there's other people that have things to worry about, because if this gets straightened out, it isn't good for the rest of us in the NFC North.
Yeah, I'll differ with you a little bit. Just as far as JJ, I do think it's, you know, as much, and who knows what they told him behind the scenes. We may never know, but from the outside looking in, it looks like he lost somebody. Maybe he's put on notice. They're obviously, but everybody already knew they were going to have to bring in some quarterback competition. So maybe the initial gut reaction is to overreact and say, "Whoa, what that does that mean they're totally done with JJ?" It's like, well, I don't know if anything's changed since the end of week 18. He had to know that he wasn't going to walk in unscathed and just have a quarterback room with him and Brosmer. So maybe that's not as big a deal as it initially feels like. Last thing I was going to mention, free agents been a little hit or miss too. They brought in Ryan Kelly, I think Jonathan Allen, like both those guys, older guys, injury histories, and it just didn't work out. So, you know, the most interesting thing is the timing. Like you said, he's down scouting and stuff. I think that's a little bit of a weird look for the organization as far as, and it doesn't sound like they're getting somebody in place before the draft. So it'll kind of be a KOC type of draft. And, that maybe he wants that. But that's a bit more pressure on him to get something right, get something to hope for. Cause if he's in control of the draft, or primarily in control of the draft, and it doesn't go well, all of a sudden there's one less guy to point the finger at in the building.
Yeah, Dilly, I want to just mention, and I think you're right. I think KOC is going to be heavy on the draft this year, but I did read a quick article. Not sure where it was coming. I believe it was through ESPN, that the director of player personnel that they currently have on staff is going to be coming in and kind of covering that. But I think you're absolutely right. You hit it on the head. It's going to be primarily KOC. We're going to see what happens, man. I mean, it's not a bad thing. I mean, I think head coaches are always involved. They're just not the end all say all like GMs, and here in Green Bay, Goody is kind of the end all. But I think that Matt LaFleur is heavily involved, and it'll be interesting to see what this shakes out for the Vikings.
Yep, I think that's Brzezinski is his name. I can't think of his first name off the top of the head. Another little preview from the Audible angle and our last NFL conversation about the Packers offensive coaching staff. What does it mean if these guys aren't really heavily recruited, but we think we have a good offense? And the league responds, and we got Sean Mannion, former backup quarterback, all-around fun guy, heading to the Eagles. Packers quarterback coach off to the Eagles as offensive coordinator. So leapfrogs Stenovic, leapfrogs over some, guys that maybe have been waiting in the wings for a while, and there he is. What is your takeaway on Mannion gone?
First takeaway, Dilly, is we had a question. I think a couple of weeks ago, we sat with senior leadership here at Audible Angle, and they were asking us what our reach was, what we thought you and I were reaching as far as geographic area. Obviously, our reach goes all the way out to Philly, because the minute our episode hit saying that there hasn't been anybody taken from our offensive coaching staff here in Green Bay, boom, Philly moves, and they're like, wow, thank goodness that we've got some interns watching the podcast history. And whammo, we lost our quarterback coach. Brings up some interesting questions, Dilly, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. If our quarterback's coach and I know inside 1265 they thought highly of him, But if our quarterbacks coach is going to go without calling one NFL play in his history, and now he's going to handle the Philadelphia Eagles offense that was near a dumpster fire in 2025, do they know something we didn't know? And if they do, shame on us. And if they don't, and they knew exactly what we know, shame on us. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Well, I'll tell you what, we've talked a little bit about Stenovic and the situation with the strong signal caller as the head coach. I think perhaps the Packers knew. I believe that the Packers would have made this move if possible. Now, depends on how the timing worked out because I'm sure he would have taken a Philly job where he gets to call the plays, unless he had already accepted the Packers offensive coordinator position if Stenovic had gone anywhere. I think it leaves a hole. He's only been there, I think, 2 years working with Love, and so perhaps, and Love has been, that was his second quarterbacks coach, and he's been in the league a little bit longer. So I'd say there's a fair chance that it isn't going to be a um, huge loss for the Packers just because of, what I mentioned with LaFleur really being the head of the offense. It might say that Stenovic is perhaps going to be good right where he is. Because if he didn't get an offer out of the deal and one of his assistants leapfrogs him, maybe they're just not a lot of confidence in him being a play caller. And, part of that might be, I think it happens, in the real world. He might be comfortable and happy where he is now. Not every coordinator needs to become a head coach. Um, so we'll see on that. Other,
It,
go ahead.
yeah, I've got some other thoughts, and I think this should bring up a question within Green Bay Packer Nation. Are we holding on with Stenovic at the detriment of the organization with some of these young up and coming coaches? I mean, obviously the Eagles thought highly of our quarterbacks coach, and if we like Stenovic, to be honest, I mean, we've talked about it, well chronicled with us here. He was an offensive line coach, and he's probably a great offensive line coach. I heard Brian Balaga on his podcast just recently talking about how much he believes in Steno. But he said, I believe in him as an offensive line coach, right? And what an offensive coordinator in Green Bay does, 100%. All they do is install, and I shouldn't say all they do, but primarily what they do is install the offense, right? They work with the offensive linemen on what they need to do. They work with the wide receiver group, the entire group on the offense, quarterbacks room, running backs room, all of that. And that's what he does on game day. His job is done, Dilly. For all intents and purposes, his job is done on Fridays. The rest of this may be a little bit on Saturday morning when they install, maybe some short yardage stuff. I'm kind of trying to reach into my knowledge of some conversations in 1265. But at the end of the day, all he's doing is sitting in the box and giving some advice on what packages the defense is in and recommending what works well for LaFleur. LaFleur calls the plays. So my point is, obviously, Mannion is not going to take an offensive coordinator position, number one, that doesn't call plays. He wanted to have control. Fair enough. I get it. The fact that of the matter, the Packers were never going to match the offer that the Eagles made for him if he stays as the quarterbacks coach. It's just not, it's apples and oranges. Offensive coordinator money versus quarterbacks coach money. So is the relationship, and what I think we're missing, and what I'm trying to, it's a long-winded, what I'm trying to get to is I think we have to have more influence. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. There has to be more influence from that coaching staff. And it starts and ends with Steno, with Matt LaFleur during the game days to make him better. And maybe this quarterback's coach was trying to do that, and he's frustrated. And this is a signal of that interior. I smell something here, Dilly, and it isn't good, right? And I know we gave him the extension, and I'm not calling for Matt LaFleur's head, but I'm telling you, this could be a rocky next 3-4 years of his contract if things can't get sorted out inside. And I'm smelling something funny.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm smelling something. I'm not smelling anything hilarious. But what I would maybe suggest is that the Stenovic seat might get a little warm because I won't argue with you on the idea that maybe LaFleur needs a little more help from the coaches, a little more dynamic input. There's two things about Stenovic. You're right in that we don't really know exactly what he does. And, it's not like the organization has to outline, on a game day basis or sell the coach to us, to the general public. So maybe he does some more behind the scenes. Um, the thing I would say is if his lineage is offensive line coach, run game coordinator, and now offensive coordinator, what you would think is if Matt LaFleur and Goody and Russ Ball got together and said, we're the trifecta at the top of this organization, we need to look at everything to get us over the hump. I would think Stenovic's name would come up because the offensive line play is was not good this year, and the run game was not particularly good. And I would think or hope, if we're paying him, that LaFleur relied on Stenovic to, let him know what he thought the offensive line, what would put them in the best position to succeed in, and that comes down to different blocking schemes. There's the easy one that everybody thinks of is zone inside, zone outside, zone or stretch. There's gap schemes, and people talk about duo. I'm not going to pretend to know all the intricacies, but I would think LaFleur would rely at least some on what Stenovic says works best and then try to use it. Then he's putting that in as part of his game plan, and he might be saying, look, we did not get that right this year, and we have to get that right this year. And it doesn't, and I feel like LaFleur's the guy because they have changed a little bit over the years, and they did some different things with Jacobs than what they did with Aaron Jones prior to that, and you have to get that part of it right. And if it's a totally different run scheme, instead of, and we kind of went bigger, Aaron Banks was supposed to be bigger and Sean Ryan is bigger. And maybe it's like, because we had a long history of kind of the athletic linemen with more than size. That's kind of like Tom and even Bakhtiari. He wasn't a huge behemoth at left tackle. A lot of these guys were different body types even. So anyway, seat a little hotter on Stanovic. Let's get to defense here.
One other thing, Dilly, can I
Yeah.
just wrap on the offensive side that something to support just the smell that I'm having. And I know I don't want, I'm not asking you to agree, but food for thought and chew on this as we get on to the defensive side. We had a great replacement on staff, and he's no longer there because he followed Halfley down to Miami, and it was an easy sub in if we lost Mannion, and that was Nathaniel Hackett, who's done it before. He was the quarterback's coach before, and he's going to be the quarterback's coach now at the Dolphins. Is that a question to say, why would Nathaniel Hackett follow a guy he doesn't know what he's going to do? And maybe there's a great relationship between the whatever. I mean, I know he was working on the defensive side for this year. That's why he was brought back on to help on the defensive side, kind of the Saleh thing, right? For last year as well, that he was helping on the defense with an offensive mind. But boy, it's interesting that Matt LaFleur couldn't keep, or maybe they just didn't see it happening. And who's smarter in this game? Halfley looks like, because he got Nathaniel Hackett, who's a kind of a quarterback whisperer, not a KOC quarterback whisperer for those of us that are keeping track. But I just wanted to throw that out, not really looking at it necessarily a real quick answer from you, but just food for thought, man. I smell something over there at 1265, and it isn't the championship right now.
Yeah, I mean, all I'll say on Nathaniel Hackett is I just wasn't extremely inspired by him. As he had some offensive coordinator runs, and then he Rodgers brought him to the Jets, and that was pretty stinky. It was pretty stinky in Denver, and this is as offensive coordinator, so this is a different deal. And his official position with the Packers was a defensive analyst role this year. Maybe he's in our example of guys that, moved up some levels and wasn't very successful at it. And, he was, before that, he was offensive coordinator with the Packers for a little bit with Rodgers too. And maybe it's one of those where he is maybe the bad taste in your mouth about him as an offensive coordinator takes your eye off the ball on the fact that he was a good quarterbacks coach. We'll see who they bring in. Um, we're going to be bringing in some new defensive coaches that I wanted to bring up. We kind of talked about Gannon a bit. Bobby Babich from the Buffalo Bills. He was passing game coordinator, and he joins the Green Bay Packers as a passing game coordinator and secondary coach as well. You know, it's it's interesting. It's another experienced guy that kind of has. It wasn't full defensive coordinator, but he has that coordinator experience. And then no chance. I'm going to guarantee I say this right. Sam Seifkis, who comes over, he was a coordinator at Virginia Tech and doesn't say much here, but he does have the WEAC lacrosse playing, Platteville coaching. Badger was he a Badger graduate assistant? So he's got Wisconsin roots. That's an interesting guy. So you can say what you want. That's another guy with coordinator defense, and I think I kind of like what's happening. And when we said it with the Jonathan Gannon hire, this kind of a win hire or win now type of hire, and that it seems like the whole staff is kind of like a bunch of guys that are going to be able to contribute to the defense as a whole, as well as whatever their named position is.
Yeah, Dilly, I'm liking it, man, and I haven't been the biggest, Packers first guy here. Obviously, I'm a fan, but what we're bringing in here is a bunch of football dudes, right? I mean, everybody's watching on national media the Jonathan Gannon's, hammering on the guy on one of his defensive guys when he was down in Arizona and kind of blowing up at him. It's kind of old school guys, and Bobby Babich certainly isn't a guy that you really necessarily want on the podium and talking. He's a little fiery. He's a little interesting. More youth that's coming into that defense. I like the look. I'll tell you right now, and maybe we're not. Maybe we should be taking more credit for some of these moves. And from 1265, they're listening to Audible Angle. We've been touting the WEAC. We've been talking about the different football programs, basketball programs, in those. Now they're starting to look. The big time's starting to look, man. I mean, we got to look for a guy from River Falls, and he's going to D1. Now we got a couple of guys coming from the coaching ranks into the pros. Hey, you got to get on the radar screen from us first, and then you got a chance.
I'll tell you what, the Bridge Up Brewing Keep It Local segment is working well for the individuals and teams and leagues that come up in those discussions. I mean, you outlined it pretty well there. Another team I have a little bit of a question on, what the hell's going on with the Broncos? They fire offensive coordinators and staff, and then they're up and coming. Probably, I would assume they didn't fire him. Their guy Carmichael, where does he go? He goes to the Bills as offensive coordinator, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of questioning who's the GM up there. It's a former player for the Broncos, right? That's
Yeah,
their GM.
John Lynch.
Yeah, yeah, John Lynch. I'm questioning. Maybe they're taking the eyes off the ball here when they're getting towards the Super Bowl, and they just kind of forgot about the guys inside the building. I don't know what's going on, but maybe a questionable hire from the Bills. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there's a lot of things that are leaving the Bills too. Maybe we shouldn't be asking about the Broncos. Maybe we should be talking about the Bills and what they're letting walk out the door, and then what they're letting while the door's open, who they're letting come in. I mean, it's kind of, is it riffraff? Is it not riffraff? But what I think I can tell you is it's unproven at the level that they're asking them to do this. And here's the deal, Dilly. We got to circle back to this. I've got some questions over in the Eagles country with making that hire from our quarterbacks coach. I would have the same questions if it happened here in Green Bay. If we brought him from the quarterbacks coach as the offensive coordinator, never playing a call, he's got a lot of mouths to feed in Philly. I mean, there's a lot of some interesting personalities, if you will. When you're talking AJ Brown, when you're talking Jalen Hurts, those are some interesting dudes. And you're taking over something that was a mess. And in Philly, I think their patience goes about till the end of this episode, which is about another 6 minutes long. And if you don't get shit done in 6 minutes, you're going to be looking for another job. And it ain't going to be an offensive coordinator job when you don't get it done. Now, he could be really good. and he could succeed. He's got the tools there. You've got Saquon Barkley. You've got a 1 year removed Super Bowl winning team. So there's going to be some success there. Sorry to kind of defray us, but I do think that there's questions both in the Bills and the Broncos organization at the highest levels. Dilly, how did we win? Was it all just head coaching and players and overachievers? Because let's be honest, that quarterback overachieved. I'm going back and forth. One of our listeners here, Bo Nix, is overachieving. He's not great. And we've got to be realistic. And we know it's well chronicled. I'm not a big fan of Drake May. He's going to probably prove me wrong here in the Super Bowl, but I think the Seahawks defense is going to have something to say about that.
Yeah, I was going to be remiss if we didn't bring up Best of Life 4395. He accused us of saying that we had brains, which we never claimed to have. A little interesting back and forth there, but I tell you what, apparently Broncos fans strongly believe in Bo Nix better than Drake May. If he would have played, he would have embarrassed Drake May, allegedly. Get into the comments if you disagree with that action. We'll see. I mean, obviously, the weird thing is that, we've gone over it many times. Sean Payton is the offensive control figure in that organization, and he's cleaning house and guys are leaving, which just makes you wonder, take a look in the mirror. Peyton, I don't think he's a big take a look in the mirror and blame myself kind of guy, so we'll see how that ends up. Last question on coaches that I've come up with, and I didn't mention it in our extensive pre-show meeting, but Todd Monken to the Cleveland Browns. He's another offensive coordinator. Sounds like Jim, don't call me Craig Schwartz, was not thrilled with not getting the head coaching job in Cleveland, and it's kind of one of those where you think, what are the Browns? Browns were trying to hold on to the one thing they had, which was pretty good defense. How badly did the Browns fumble the ball by just the whole process because I think what I saw in some reporting is that Schwartz kind of thought it was the deal. It was locked up and they were going to bring in a strong offensive coordinator, and whether he thought that was going to be Monken with him as a head coach or not, they're going to lose Schwartzy out of the deal.
Yeah, and if you listen to or read the comments, Dilly, I think a lot of people were thinking that Schwartz might be a better fit here in Green Bay than what our boy Johnny Gannon is. And here's the deal. For years, that dumpster fire has always been smoldering down in Browns country over in Cleveland. They've had flashes of some coaching and some good stuff that's happened, but it's just one match away or some kerosene away from firing again. And maybe this is the kind of the nail in the coffin by letting Schwartz go. On the other side of the coin, Dilly, Schwartz has had a lot of opportunities. He's had a lot of big opportunities, and I'm not sure that he's the right fit there in Cleveland. So I think that's probably the right choice to get some new blood in there. But I don't know. I mean, I just didn't seem like anybody wanted the job over in Cleveland. Schwartzy did want the job, but the Cleveland Browns says, I don't want the job. We don't want you. So it's one of those deals where, again, that fire might flash over in Cleveland and the fan base might be in for another long 10 years. I don't know who's going to be quarterback. I don't know if the quarterback's real good anyway, but fun to watch from the outside looking in because I don't wear the orange and brown.
I will have to admit to everybody that I think the Browns defense, especially in the second half of the year, was a little overrated. They got run on more. I think the Myles Garrett thing was fun, especially on a loser team. It's remarkable that he got there with the sacks with just a lack of pass rushing opportunities because they never had the lead and never had, favorable pass or not never, but infrequently had game scripts where they had heavy pass rush opportunities. The one thing about Schwartz is I believe he was still kind of a wide nine guy, is the type of defense that he went with. And we did see that. You'd see Myles Garrett, and back in his Detroit Lions days too, you'd see defensive ends damn near covering the slot, but they are pass rushing from out there. And I do think teams kind of figured that scheme out a little bit. I'm sure he adjusted some over the years, but there might be just a little bit of that. We'll see if he ends up with another coordinator position, but they were successful with good personnel. And I wonder if some teams kind of thought, that that defense of strategy is kind of been uh, countered by the offensive coordinators in the league at this point. I think we have one more, unless you have something. My last item for NFL talk, and you did mention it, but you only mentioned half of it. Is it a historical event in the Pro Bowl, which is moronic to say because it's a total joke, but that two quarterbacks that are teammates to start the year end up representing the AFC in the Pro Bowl, whatever they do now. Not a game, flag football match. What the hell do they even do now? But we're talking Joe Flacco and Shedeur Sanders from the Cleveland Browns by way of the Bengals in the case of Flacco. Wow. How do you think Flacco feels? He's got to be excited.
I'll tell you. Hey, take it and run. 18 years in the league, Joe Flacco. How old is he? 41, 42? I don't know. He's old. I mean, but Joe Flacco making the Pro Bowl after 18 years. I mean, the guy's slinging it. He's winning Super Bowls. He's bringing the Bengals from the brink of disaster to just off the brink of disaster to hand it back to Burrow and watch and hold the clipboard for the rest of the season. That didn't matter. I feel good about Joe Flacco. He deserves it. Joe Flacco should feel good about it. Shedeur Sanders better just hide his head because what the hell is he doing in that game, man? I mean, come on. It's the same. I'll tell you right now, there's no reason that Keyshawn Nixon is in the Pro Bowl either, because Keyshawn Nixon leads one thing in the league. You know what he leads in? PIs. He leads the league in PIs. Let's get him in this Pro Bowl. That's a good plan. What are we doing?
Yeah, I wonder if Joe Flacco ever thought after 18 years and the start of this season, did he know that he was in a quarterback's room with a fellow Pro Bowler? I'm sure he's shocked he's there. And then if we had, Flacco seems like a guy that maybe still has a flip phone, maybe not tuned into media too much. He's just out there bowling or golfing, hanging out with his family, doing stuff, and he just shows up at the Pro Bowl next week. I think it starts next week. They have activities going on, and he sees Shedeur there, and he's like, "Well, what? Hey, man, good to see you. What are you up to?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm starting in the Pro Bowl. You're my backup." He just laughs, like, what happened to Gabriel? He started after I left, didn't he? So Shedeur earns it the hard way by playing mediocre for 5 games and kind of good in 2 games. So there you go, Pro Bowl.
Hey, who cares?
All right, Herbs, let's wrap it up. You got anything else NFL-wise? Anything come up on the TV in the last 15 minutes?
Nothing NFL-wise, but I'll close with this, Dilly. And this is we're always trying to get the football games. NFL's trying to bring these games down further, right, down to under 3 hours. Did you catch the Australian Open? 5 hours and 27 minutes in the semifinal. These guys are puking in towels. They're cramping up. And all it does is set up a final for the ages. And when I say that, the oldest ever final in a major, Djokovic, at a ripe old age of 38, is going to try to stop Alcaraz, who's 22, from winning his fourth major. Should be exciting, right? In the 100-degree weather. Let's see who's got more water in the system.
Yeah,
I tell you half hour.
Djokovic, they can't get rid of him, man. He just keeps popping up. I think they tried to keep him out of the country. We don't have to get into why. Whew. Come on, guys. What? We just have to talk about it more. They tried to keep him. That's the only way they could keep him out of the British Open Australian Open finals is trumped up bunko. That's all we have to say about that. We better wrap before we swerve into a ditch here on Djokovic and certain policies from.
We covered all, Billy. We covered all.
Pump it up. See you soon.
See ya.